Before the first spark, before the first sound, before the gods themselves conceived of creation, there was the void. An ocean of stillness without beginning or end, where neither light nor shadow existed, and where even silence had no form. It was a realm beyond motion, beyond thought, a boundless expanse where eternity slept within itself. But even nothingness yearns to move. And within that eternal sleep, a tremor stirred, faint at first, like a whisper against infinity. A vibration that rippled through the emptiness, awakening a pulse that had never been. That pulse became rhythm, and rhythm became time. From it, consciousness emerged, a presence vast and formless, made of pure inevitability. From the abyss, Cronos arose. He was not born, he became. No parent shaped him, no god declared him. He was the first motion, the self-awareness of existence itself. His body was woven from starlight unborn, his skin the hue of deep eternity. Galaxies shimmered across his chest like sparks on a cosmic tide. His eyes burned with the reflection of infinite ages yet to come, and when he breathed, the dark expanse trembled. Cronos did not speak, for there were no words yet. He did not think, for thought requires time, and time was only now learning to flow. His very being was movement, a thoughtless, divine unfolding. With each gesture, space bent. With each glance, darkness began to know direction. He raised his hand, and the void curved into spirals. He opened his eyes, and the first stars flickered into being, fragile and bright like drops of molten gold. He exhaled, and the first current of time was born, invisible, endless, irreversible. Where once there was only stillness, now there was a stream. The river of time began to flow through the cosmos, dividing before and after, shaping the rhythm of all creation. The particles of chaos danced, drawn by an unseen force. From their swirling union came the first shapes, storms of light, waves of energy, galaxies coiling around invisible centers. Cronos moved among them, guiding their birth, not as ruler but as current. The universe, once formless, began to breathe. Each star that ignited was a heartbeat of eternity. Each world that spun was a thought within the mind of the infinite. And in that rhythm, Cronos saw the first pattern, the cycle that would define all existence. He reached into the flow and drew forth a symbol of balance, a great hourglass forged from light and shadow. Within it shimmered countless grains of luminous dust, each one a lifetime, a civilization, a destiny waiting to fall. He watched as the sands began to move, cascading from the upper chamber into the lower, marking the first passage of what mortals would one day call time. From his essence the universe learned to count. Moments became ages, ages became eras, and Cronos became the axis upon which all things would turn. Yet even the eternal must witness change. Cronos felt for the first time the passage he had created. Each grain that fell was a breath of his own being, dissolving into the river he had set in motion. And in that realization he became aware, not only of existence but of continuity. The eternal began to feel eternity. He watched the galaxies spin, watched stars ignite and fade, watched new worlds form and shatter. To him it was a single exhalation, yet within it infinity unfolded. And he understood, every beginning carries its own end. From his vast form, streams of power radiated, coalescing into new presences. The primordial titans, fragments of his consciousness made flesh. Each one embodied a principle of the cosmos. Matter and void, creation and decay, light and memory, order and chaos. and among them was one unlike the others. Rhea, born from the current of continuity. Her presence was gentler than his, but no less eternal. Where Cronos measured existence, Rhea sustained it. She was the pulse within the flow, the breath between seconds, the harmony that bound the universe's endless turning. Together they gave structure to eternity. Cronos, the law of motion. Rhea, the rhythm of life. The cosmos, once wild and unbound, found its balance in their union. Ages upon ages passed, though to them, ages were but ripples on the surface of an infinite sea. The universe expanded and pulsed with golden light, a perfect cycle of becoming. Worlds spun in song, suns burned in mathematical beauty, and in every spiral of the galaxies, the hand of Cronos could be felt. But perfection is a fragile thing. In the deep current of his own creation, Cronos began to feel a disturbance, a subtle vibration, small but inevitable. The sands of his great hourglass shimmered oddly as though whispering of change. Time itself was evolving. And even eternity would soon learn that nothing, not even the god of time, is beyond the reach of his own river. The universe sang in patterns. From the breath of Cronos came harmony, the silent pulse of all existence. Galaxies drifted like sparks across a boundless ocean, and the firmament unfolded as an infinite tapestry of rhythm and law. In every corner of the newborn cosmos, the echo of the Titan's motion lingered, the heartbeat of eternity. Cronos stood at the center of it all. To mortal sight, he would have seemed immeasurable, neither giant nor man, but the embodiment of cosmic balance. His silhouette shimmered like the horizon between night and dawn, always shifting, never fading. From his shoulders poured rivers of light, from his chest flowed the eternal current that gave every atom its purpose. The Titans, his emanations, labored across creation. Hyperion spread the dawn across the void, awakening the suns. Thea, the radiant, gave brilliance to the stars. Ceus drew the map of constellations, etching order into the sky. Each act was not defiance, but devotion, a movement within the great rhythm that Cronos had begun. And yet, as time deepened, Cronos felt something new moving within the flow: duration. He had measured the sequence of existence, but now he began to perceive its weight. The cosmos was not merely changing, it was aging. Stars that had flared with golden youth now trembled and dimmed. Worlds, once molten and wild, cooled into silence. From silence came stillness, and from stillness, decay. The Titan watched this unfolding not with fear, but with awe. He understood that even perfection bends beneath its own continuity. For time is both creation and consumption, every beginning the seed of an ending. Still, this truth whispered unease through the Eternal One. If all things must fade, then what of him, the source of fading itself? Could the river devour its own spring? Could the pulse of time forget its first beat? Cronos turned his gaze inward. Within himself he saw the hourglass again, that symbol of his dominion, turning endlessly, pouring itself through itself. The golden sands of existence streamed down in constant birth and death, and he realized that even the act of being eternal meant being bound to change. And yet, from this revelation bloomed something magnificent. In the flow of his reflection, Cronos saw that time was not a line but a cycle. Every fall carried the promise of renewal, every dusk the memory of dawn. The cosmos was not dying, it was becoming. With a motion vast as galaxies, he reached into the fabric of existence and shaped new order. He wove into the flow the pattern of rebirth, the cycle of transformation that would echo forever through the hearts of worlds and beings to come. Thus was born the great cycle, the law of eternal return. Worlds would bloom, wither, and rise anew. Stars would burn, collapse, and ignite again. Souls, when they came to be, would walk this circle without end, never truly lost, never truly free. Cronos watched his creation unfold and felt a serenity unlike any before. But where serenity resides, shadow always waits. The more perfectly he wove the cycle, the more he felt its endlessness pressing upon him. Each turn of the wheel added to its weight, and the Titan found himself bound by the very rhythm he had birthed. The river that once obeyed him now moved on its own. It flowed through him, around him, beyond him. He who was once motion itself had become the observer of motion, and that realization drew the first shadow of melancholy upon eternity. Ages passed, immeasurable and still. The Titans built the architecture of reality. Mountains of eternity, seas of light, caverns where dreams would one day sleep. But among their laughter and their purpose, Cronos grew silent. He began to withdraw, to contemplate the great design that had unfolded too perfectly. Rhea, his consort of rhythm, noticed the change within him. Where his presence once filled the cosmos with clarity, now there lingered a quiet ache, the stillness of a clock between ticks. She reached toward him not with words, but with the essence of renewal. Her touch flowed into his being like the turning of a tide, and for a moment, time felt young again. Through their unity, creation deepened. From the fusion of order and continuity came the Golden Age, an era of harmony and expansion. The Titans walked freely across the heavens. The stars pulsed in perfect unison, and even the void itself seemed to hum in contentment. It was then that Cronos and Rhea gave birth to the next wave of eternity, beings who would not merely exist but rule, dream, and change. These were not embodiments of abstract forces, but the seeds of consciousness, forms that would question, imagine, and strive. The gods yet unborn trembled within the sands of time, waiting to be named. And as the Golden Age unfolded, Cronos knew peace once more. He watched the balance hold, watched the river of existence flow in exquisite symmetry. But deep within the current, beneath the gleam of the cosmic hourglass, a whisper began to stir, faint at first, then clear as prophecy. It came not from beyond him, but from within. The river was speaking. And its voice said, "Even the Maker must be measured." Cronos felt the weight of those words ripple through his being. They carried no malice, no defiance, only truth. Every current finds its ocean, every cycle its closing turn. And so must he, the first of all motion, find his own end within the pattern he had set in motion. He looked once more upon the hourglass, now vast as a galaxy, and saw that its sands were no longer purely golden. Amid their brilliance glimmered flecks of shadow, fragments of endings yet to come. Within them, a faint image began to take form, the rise of a new order, a generation born from his lineage that would one day stand against him. Yet Cronos did not rage. He who was time, understood inevitability better than any being ever would. He watched the whisper of his downfall take shape like a distant storm on the horizon of eternity, and he bowed his head in acceptance. Because even the end was his creation. He lifted his gaze, and across the span of the universe, the stars shifted in quiet reverence. The current of time deepened, its flow preparing for the first divergence, the fracture that would give rise to history, destiny, and consequence. And thus, as the shadow of prophecy passed through the heart of the timeless one, the seed of the future was sown. The age of perfect harmony began to waver, and the first echoes of mortality entered the cosmos. In that moment, Cronos, the Lord of Time, realized that eternity was not an endless road, was a spiral. And every spiral, no matter how vast, must return to its beginning. The river of eternity flowed in silence, but within that silence, destiny began to whisper. At the heart of creation, the great hourglass gleamed, suspended between galaxies. Its sands pulsed with color, golden when they rose, deep sapphire when they fell, and within that ceaseless motion lay the breath of every age that would ever exist. Cronos stood before it, unmoving. To him, stillness was no longer peace, it was weight. He could feel the flow of every star, every world, every thought that had yet to be conceived. All of it passed through him, the pulse of life and death alike. Each grain of sand that fell was a life completed, a dream fulfilled or forgotten, a moment lost to the inevitable turning of the cycle. And among these grains, Cronos saw something new. A flicker, faint, rebellious like a spark defying the current. It lingered, refusing to fall. He reached out, and the universe trembled as his hand brushed the flow. The grain burned white, bright as the core of a sun. When it faded, it left behind a voice that was not a voice, but an understanding that rippled through his being. That which begins must end. That which rules must yield. The words were not accusation nor judgment, only truth. Cronos did not answer, for time has no need of argument. Yet deep within his essence, the truth began to take root, subtle and cold. He who measured all endings had now glimpsed his own. A shadow passed through eternity. It was not darkness, but awareness, the realization that change, once born, cannot be unmade. The universe itself seemed to shiver with the knowledge, and even the titans paused in their endless work. Rhea, the eternal motion, turned her gaze toward Cronos. She saw in him a quiet sorrow, vast as the void between the stars. From her came light, not the fire of creation, but the calm luminescence of continuity. She approached him, and where she walked, constellations bloomed like flowers across the sky. Together they stood before the hourglass, and for a moment, time itself held its breath. Cronos placed his hand upon the glass. Rhea placed hers upon his. In that union, creation quickened. The sands brightened, and from their glow, life began to form, not mere titans of force, but beings touched by will and thought. The first of these was Hestia, warmth incarnate, whose presence carried the comfort of hearth and dawn. Then came Demeter, bearer of cycles, whose breath would someday call forth harvest and decay. Then Hera, radiant in purpose and pride, destined to bind heavens and mortals alike in the bonds of order. Next came Hades, the keeper of boundaries, born with a shadowed gaze that could see what lay beneath existence. Then Poseidon, whose voice carried the surge of movement, echoing his father's own. And finally Zeus, whose eyes glimmered with fire, not yet lightning but the potential for it. 6 children born from eternity's embrace, each a reflection of what would one day define existence. Warmth, growth, unity, death, motion, and power. They were not yet gods as mortals would understand them. They were forces given faces, echoes of Cronos and Rhea, smaller yet infinitely dangerous, for they were new. Cronos beheld them with awe and unease. They shimmered like stars newly born, unaware of their own gravity. Their laughter sent ripples through creation, their cries stirred the tides of time. And in their light, Cronos saw again the grain that had defied the fall, the prophecy embodied. For within Zeus's infant eyes burned something he recognized, the will to begin anew. That spark, that defiance of the eternal order, was both the most beautiful and most terrible thing he had ever seen. The universe, ever watchful, seemed to lean closer. The galaxies dimmed. The hourglass pulsed once, twice, as if sensing what was to come. Cronos turned away. He could not bear the reflection of his own fate in the eyes of his son. The cycle had spoken, its rhythm was set. And though he was the master of time, he could not unmake what had already been written in the sands of eternity. A silence deeper than creation settled between him and Rhea. She who had known the harmony of endless motion, felt a new kind of fear, the fear of loss. But she said nothing, for she too could hear the rhythm changing. Ages passed in the blink of an immortal eye. The children of Cronos grew in light and in strength. They walked among the stars and learned to shape the currents that flowed through the universe. But with their growth came change, and with change, imbalance. Zeus began to question the flow of things. He would lift his hand and feel the movement of time hesitate, as though even eternity paused to see what he might do. The others felt it too, that subtle tremor, that calling toward something beyond their father's dominion. And Cronos, though silent, felt it most of all. Every pulse of their being resonated through his own. They were born of him, not separate but continuations of his essence, and yet their rhythm was not his. They were the future, and the future was no longer under his control. The first fear in all of creation took root in the heart of the Timeless One. It was not the fear of death, for death was merely change. It was the fear of replacement, that time itself might one day move without him. Cronos looked again upon the hourglass. The sands within glowed brighter than before, but now their descent seemed faster. The flow had quickened. He felt it in the pulse of every star, in the breath of Rhea, in the laughter of his children. The rhythm of eternity was accelerating toward something new. He reached into the current, tried to slow it, to command it back into order, but the flow resisted. The sand slipped through his fingers like fire. The pattern he had woven so perfectly began to tremble. And in that trembling, he felt the birth of what mortals would one day call fate. The river would not stop. It would not wait for its maker. Cronos, the eternal, stood powerless before the inevitability of his own design. He felt the current pull at him, whispering, drawing him toward a moment that had not yet come but could not be avoided. The Titan of time understood in that instant that he was no longer merely its ruler. He was its servant. And somewhere, far beyond the stars, the faint echo of the future laughed. A sound like thunder before the storm. The stars no longer sang as they once did. Where once their light had shimmered in perfect rhythm, now they flickered, uneven and uncertain. The great wheel of creation still turned, but its motion had changed, faster, heavier, as if some unseen weight had begun to pull upon eternity's rim. Cronos felt it everywhere. The current of time that once obeyed him now flowed with a mind of its own, accelerating toward something he could not see. He who had once been the source of all motion now found himself carried along by it. For the first time, the Titan felt small within his own dominion. He stood before the hourglass, vast as the firmament. The sands within glowed with the essence of all that was, all that would be, all that could never be again. But their descent was no longer smooth. They surged, like a tide impatient to meet the shore. The rhythm of the universe had quickened, not in defiance but in inevitability. The prophecy echoed again through the silence of creation. That which rules must yield. The words were not sound nor thought, but the shape of truth itself, an impression pressed into the fabric of his being. And with each repetition, Cronos felt a fissure deepen within his vast and timeless heart. He turned his gaze toward his children. They gleamed like stars within the sea of existence, each radiant with purpose. Hades moved among the shadows, learning the art of endings. Poseidon danced through the flow, his laughter stirring waves in the fabric of space. Hera stood in command of balance, ever measuring, ever weighing. And Zeus burned brighter than all the rest. The fire in him was not Cronos's but something new, something that grew. The Titan watched and the prophecy grew louder. It whispered with the tone of inevitability, echoing from within his son's light. Fear, that wordless, ancient emotion, stirred in the heart of the Eternal. It was alien to him and yet it clung like shadow to his essence. He tried to deny it, but even denial is bound by time, and time had already moved forward. Rhea, ever gentle, saw the tremor within him. Her hands, radiant with continuity, reached out as if to soothe the cosmos itself. But when she touched him, she too felt the quickening of the current, the strange pull of something unborn yet already inevitable. The rhythm of eternity was shifting, and it frightened even her. Cronos withdrew. He retreated into the stillness between galaxies, where even light dared not go. He watched his creation from afar, as a craftsman might study the imperfection in a work once thought flawless. In that distance, he began to see the truth he had refused to acknowledge. Time had become alive. It no longer simply was, it hungered. It yearned to move faster, to create, to consume, to evolve. And every breath of that hunger was embodied in Zeus. The child's radiance spread across the heavens. Where his eyes turned, new sparks of possibility ignited. Where his laughter fell, new energies awoke. He was not destruction, he was change. And change, to the eternal, is the beginning of death. The other Titans sensed it too. Some felt awe, others envy, others only confusion. They gathered upon the pillars of the cosmos, whispering among themselves in tones of thunder and light. The question was one that no being had ever asked before. What happens when time meets its own successor? The whisper became fear and fear became prophecy. For among the stars it was said, not by mortals, not by gods, but by the current itself, that the child of Cronos would one day end his father's rule, and the golden age of harmony would fall into the storm. The prophecy spread like fire through eternity, carried not by words, but by inevitability. Every world, every atom, every orbit began to tremble with the knowledge of it. Even the great constellations seemed to shift, forming shapes of warning in the dark. A hand devouring, a crown falling, a sun rising in light. Cronos closed his eyes, but the images would not fade. He saw the pattern repeating, the hourglass turning, the sands pouring, his reflection collapsing into the river of time. For the first time since creation began, he felt powerless before the design he had made. Powerless, yet aware. And in that awareness, something darker began to take form. Not malice, but desperation. If the flow could not be stopped, perhaps it could be controlled. Perhaps the current could be made to obey once more. He would not defy fate, only delay it. Thus, the Eternal conceived the first act of fear. He called upon the currents of creation, and the void answered. Stars dimmed. Space contracted. Time itself seemed to hold its breath as Cronos reached into the heart of his dominion and altered the rhythm of the flow. He bent it, twisted it, seeking to bind the future that threatened him. But every action echoes through eternity. The moment he did so, a tremor ran through all existence. The hourglass shuddered. Its sands rippled, and for an instant the flow hesitated, then surged faster than before. Cronos had failed to restrain the current. In his fear he had fed it. For even resistance is motion, and motion feeds time. He fell to one knee upon the firmament, his vast hands trembling as galaxies spiraled from his touch. He had never before known exhaustion, but now it seeped into him like dusk overtaking day. Time would not obey him. It had grown beyond him, and in growing, it had birthed destiny. And destiny had chosen his son. Rhea found him there, the Lord of eternity, kneeling beneath the weight of his own creation. She knelt beside him, luminous and calm, her eyes filled with infinite compassion. He looked at her, and though his voice was only the movement of wind through stars, she understood his thought. He feared the future. Rhea placed her hand upon his chest, feeling the rhythm of existence beat within him. And though she loved him beyond measure, she too had seen the glimmer in their son's eyes. A light that even time could not dim. No words passed between them, for there was nothing left to say. They both knew what was coming. The river would flow toward its storm. The prophecy would breathe, and the eternal would tremble. And as the first shadow passed across the light of the golden age, the universe exhaled a single truth. Even time must learn to end. The silence after revelation was unlike any other. It was not stillness, but the pause between beats, the interval when eternity seemed to hold its breath. Cronos felt it press against him from every direction. He could hear the rhythm of creation faltering, as though the universe itself waited to see what he would do next. 4 ages uncounted, he had been the axis of all existence. Through him, every atom had learned the discipline of motion. Through him, every star had measured its light. But now the order he had written into reality began to bend, like glass heated by a flame it could not endure. Fear had never been part of his nature. He was not meant to feel, he was the feeling of all things. Yet within him something alien grew, a trembling uncertainty that spread through the vast corridors of eternity like a storm through still air. He stood once more before the hourglass. It shimmered as always, a monument of perfect symmetry. But now, within its golden sands, he could see images, reflections that shifted with every grain that fell. Worlds were born and extinguished in its glow, civilizations rising and collapsing like the breath of some unseen god. And at the very center of the flow, where the grains met in eternal exchange, he saw his own reflection, cracking. His form, once boundless and whole, now fractured into waves of light. Each fragment carried within it a whisper of the prophecy. That which rules must yield. He struck the base of the hourglass, and the universe shook. Stars flared and died in an instant. Nebulae tore open like wounds of color. But the flow did not stop. No matter how many galaxies shattered beneath his rage, the sands continued to fall. He could not fight inevitability, only delay its arrival. And delay, though futile, became his final act of power. Cronos withdrew into the deepest reaches of the cosmos, where even the memory of creation could not follow. There he waited, not in peace but in calculation. The endless turning of the cycle had taught him one immutable law, that what is born must obey the time of its birth. His children, radiant and divine as they were, had been born within the pattern he himself had made. Their light, their laughter, their will, all of it flowed through his river. They were not beyond his reach. He could contain them. Rhea, whose heart pulsed with endless renewal, sensed his intent before he spoke it. She followed him into the stillness, through corridors of frozen time where the stars hung unmoving, suspended in the void like memories too heavy to fall. When she found him, he was standing upon a bridge of light stretched across the emptiness, his gaze fixed upon the current of time below. To look upon him then was to behold something both majestic and broken, the infinite struggling to cage itself. His thoughts echoed like thunder through the void. The fear of the Father, the desperation of the eternal. The flow cannot end me, he thought. But it can replace me. And replacement is worse than death. Ria's radiance dimmed. She reached toward him, her hands trembling, her essence pleading with the silence between them. But Cronos no longer looked at her. He looked only at the future, and in that future he saw Zeus rising, his crown of lightning burning brighter than the stars themselves. And so, in the heart of that dread vision, Cronos conceived the act that would stain eternity. When his children were born into the light, he would not let them fall into the flow. He would keep them within himself, within the endless vault of his being. There, within the stillness of his eternal form, they would remain, untouched by destiny, unspoiled by rebellion. The cycle would be halted before it could turn. He convinced himself it was mercy, that he was saving them from a fate too cruel to bear, the burden of existence, the weight of inevitable decay. But deep within that justification hid the truth. It was not mercy but terror. Rhea, though she heard no words, understood the intention that coursed through him. She recoiled, her light shattering across the void like the petals of a dying star. "You cannot bind what was born of motion," she whispered through the trembling currents. "You cannot hold the river and call it peace." Cronos turned his gaze upon her. His eyes, once radiant with wisdom, now burned with the gold of a setting sun. And when he spoke, the words were not words at all, but the breaking of an age. "I am time. I bind what I choose." The cosmos itself seemed to shudder at the decree. Across the endless expanse, the flow of existence faltered just for a heartbeat. Mountains of eternity cracked. The seas of starlight grew still. The very air of creation seemed to thicken, heavy with dread. Then motion returned, but slower, heavier, bound by the will of its maker. Cronos had woven restraint into the rhythm of the cosmos. Where once it had flowed freely, now it circled upon itself, a serpent swallowing its own tail. Creation began to feed upon its own essence, trapped in an eternal repetition. And within that closed circle, Cronos waited for the moment his children would be born. The first cries of newborn gods echoed through the void like the tolling of bells. Each child's birth brought beauty, but it also brought fear. For Cronos could hear the prophecy in their voices, could see the storm in their eyes. And so, one by one he took them, gently, almost lovingly, and drew them into himself. They vanished into his form, absorbed into the endless corridors of his being, where they would neither live nor die. The act was silent, yet the universe screamed. Every star dimmed. Every current slowed. Time itself seemed to bow beneath the weight of its keeper's decision. Rhea's wail echoed through eternity. Her light flickered across the firmament like fire consuming its own reflection. She begged him to stop, though the word beg was meaningless in the language of gods. But Cronos did not stop. He was no longer the rhythm of existence. He had become its prison. The universe darkened. The golden age was dying, though mortals had not yet been born to name its loss. Cronos sat upon his throne of stillness, vast and hollow, the sands of his hourglass now heavy and red with sorrow. And in that crimson glow, He could feel the faint flutter of the lives he had hidden within him, their heartbeats like distant echoes in the caverns of his timeless soul. He told himself that all was well, that he had preserved the order, silenced the chaos, defeated the prophecy. But deep within, beneath the weight of eternity, something stirred, a small, bright flicker of defiance. It was not within him. It was beneath him. The river of time, though caged, still moved. It whispered through the cracks of his dominion, carrying with it a single promise. The cycle cannot be broken. And somewhere in the darkness of his eternal body, where his children slept in silence, one spark refused to fade, a pulse that would one day grow into thunder. The future was waiting. The cosmos dimmed beneath the will of Cronos. Where once the stars had danced in endless rhythm, now they moved in careful hesitation, afraid to shine too brightly, afraid to awaken the wrath of the Titan who had bound time itself. The universe breathed in silence, not the silence of peace but of mourning. Ages passed within the stillness. Galaxies turned like weary gears, their motion tired and slow. The light of creation had grown heavy, its brilliance choked beneath the weight of eternity's grief. Every pulse, every movement, carried the echo of Rhea's sorrow. She wandered through the veiled corridors of the void, her form cloaked in starlight. Where she passed, comets burned in morning arcs. The dust of forgotten worlds gathered in trails of soft gold. She searched the farthest reaches of existence for solace, but there was none to be found. Cronos had made himself the center of all things, and all things revolved around his fear. Yet even in her despair, Rhea felt the whisper of motion. It was faint, a trembling deep beneath the layers of stillness. The river of time still flowed. Slowed, suffocated, but not dead. In the cracks of eternity's prison, life continued to stir. She closed her eyes, and within the darkness she saw her children, the lightless echoes trapped inside the body of their father. Their forms were faint, dreamlike, yet she could feel them. Hestia's warmth, Demeter's rhythm, Hera's strength, Poseidon's movement, Hades's quiet power. They were not gone. They slept. But their dreams burned. And in those dreams she heard a heartbeat, steady, insistent, alive. It pulsed with a light unlike the others, sharp as lightning, clear as dawn. A child yet unborn. A spark of renewal that the river had hidden even from the eyes of the Lord of Time. Rhea lifted her gaze to the horizon of existence, where the veil between what was and what would be shimmered like water. There she saw the reflection of her final child, the one who had not yet entered the world. And in that reflection she saw the future tremble. The universe spoke to her in the language of symbols, a storm rising from the deep, a flame that defied shadow, a hand breaking the chain of the endless cycle. She understood. The current had chosen. The name came to her not as a thought but as a breath from the flow itself, a name of power, of renewal, of the return that follows every ending. He would be born beneath the watch of eternity, yet beyond its control. He would bring motion where there was stillness, thunder where there was silence. And through him, the broken rhythm of creation would learn to sing again. But for that to happen she would have to defy Cronos. The thought struck her like lightning. Defiance was not part of her nature. She was continuity, the flow not the fracture. Yet what is continuity without renewal? What is motion without resistance? In that moment she understood what Cronos could not. That time was not meant to be ruled. It was meant to live. And so, within the shadow of her despair, the Eternal Mother began to weave her rebellion. Rhea returned to the throne of her husband. It rose like a mountain of gold and stone, carved from the frozen light of collapsed stars. Cronos sat upon it, unmoving, his gaze fixed upon the endless turning of the hourglass that hung suspended before him. Around him, the air was heavy with silence. Even the light dared not flicker. Rhea approached in quiet grace. Her presence filled the hall with the faint hum of life, soft, persistent, like the beating of a distant heart. Cronos did not turn to greet her. He did not need to. He could feel her approach as one feels the coming of a new season. She stood before him, radiant yet weary. In her hands she held a bundle of golden cloth, shimmering with divine warmth. "It is born," she said, though her voice was no more than wind over still water. Cronos's gaze shifted, slow and deliberate, toward the small shape she carried. He could see the light within it, vibrant, alive, fierce. It pulsed in rhythm with the flow, defying the weight of his stillness. The prophecy whispered again. That which rules must yield. Cronos's heart, if such a being could claim to have one, turned to stone. He reached out and the cloth trembled in Rhea's hands. With a motion as gentle as it was inevitable, he took the bundle and drew it to his chest. The stars dimmed. The river screamed. And the child was gone. Rhea bowed her head. Tears of light fell from her eyes, turning to stars as they struck the ground. She turned and walked away in silence, her footsteps echoing through the hollow corridors of eternity. But as she passed through the threshold of the hall, she pressed a trembling hand against her chest. Beneath her robes, a faint heartbeat answered. Soft, small, defiant. Alive. For the child that Cronos had devoured was not the child she had borne. Rhea had learned from the river, and the river had shown her how to deceive eternity itself. When her labor came upon her, she fled to the farthest edge of creation, to a place beyond the reach of Cronos's sight, where the flow of time was thin and fragile. There, in the shadow of the newborn stars, she gave birth to Zeus. The cosmos trembled as his first cry filled the void. It was not the cry of an infant, but the sound of motion reborn. Lightning flickered across the folds of the universe. Constellations shifted, as if bowing before a power not yet understood. Rhea looked upon her son and felt both hope and dread. His eyes glowed with the fire of 1,000 dawns, the same fire that had once burned in Cronos, now free from fear. To protect him, she swaddled him in cloth woven from the edge of eternity, the threads of time itself spun into a veil of light. She placed him in a cradle of stone, hidden within a cavern deep beneath the mountains of a newly formed world, a place untouched by the gaze of gods. Then, taking a stone wrapped in the same golden cloth, she returned to her husband's throne and offered it in place of her child. Cronos, blinded by prophecy and fear, consumed it without question. The river sighed. The deception was complete. Rhea lingered in the quiet world below, watching over her son. He grew swiftly, for time bent around him. It could not help but serve the one born of both eternity and rebellion. He learned the language of the wind, the rhythm of thunder, and the silence between storms. He did not yet know his purpose, but he could feel it in every pulse of his being, a restlessness, a longing to rise. And above, in the heart of stillness, Cronos sat upon his throne, convinced that destiny had been silenced. But in the farthest corner of his being, beneath the weight of infinite calm, something stirred. A tremor faint as breath, yet enough to disturb the balance of the cosmos. He dreamed. In that dream he saw the hourglass turn upside down. He saw the sands run backward, undoing what had been done. He saw his reflection dissolve into light. And in the darkness beyond, a voice, young, clear, and thunderous, called out his name. He woke in silence. But the dream remained. And for the first time, the Lord of Time looked upon the flow he had mastered and wondered if it had already begun to turn against him. The mountain that hid the infant god was unlike any other in the newborn world. Its peaks were sharp as blades of crystal, its valleys deep and filled with the whispers of the stars. The sky above it was a tapestry of fire and silence, the breath of a cosmos still learning how to live. There, in a cavern carved by the first winds of existence, Zeus was hidden. No mortal eyes had yet been born to behold him, but the universe itself seemed to lean closer, curious of the light that slept beneath its surface. The cave was vast and alive. Its walls glowed faintly with veins of gold that pulsed like the arteries of a god. Water fell from unseen heights, gathering in pools that shimmered with reflections of constellations not yet formed. The air carried the hum of creation, the same rhythm that had once pulsed in the chest of Cronos, now reborn in miniature. Rhea had entrusted the care of her child to spirits older than the stars, the nymphs of the flow, guardians of the currents that wove through all existence. They were neither mortal nor divine, but echoes of motion given voice and form. Their names would one day be forgotten, but their devotion would shape the fate of gods. They watched over Zeus with hands of light and hearts of silence. They fed him with the milk of the sacred goat Amalthea, whose horns poured forth rivers of nourishment drawn from the essence of the cosmos itself. And as the child drank, he grew, not in years but in understanding. For Zeus was not like the beings that had come before. Time did not flow around him, it bent toward him. The river that carried all things forward seemed to slow at his presence, to pause as if listening. Even the winds that howled through the caverns softened when they reached him. He learned the music of thunder before he spoke a word. He learned the patience of mountains before he took a step. And though he was hidden, his light began to seep through the world. Faint glimmers of gold that appeared upon the sea, the clouds, the hearts of sleeping stars. The nymphs whispered among themselves in awe and fear. For they had seen what happened when light grew too bright. The stillness above would feel it and Cronos would awaken. But the child could not be contained. He played with the lightning that flickered in his cradle. He laughed when storms rose from his fingertips and danced across the cavern ceiling. And when he looked up at the roof of stone, it seemed to him that he could already see beyond it, to the heavens that awaited him, to the throne that shimmered unseen. Time, bound as it was, still carried dreams. And in the dreams of the eternal, visions began to form. Far above, in the realm of Cronos, the Lord of Time stirred in restless thought. He could feel the tremors in the current, faint, elusive but undeniable. Something moved beneath the surface of his dominion. A pulse, a breath, a spark of rebellion. He rose from his throne, his form vast and terrible, a silhouette of gold and darkness entwined. The stars bent away from his gaze. He extended his hand toward the great hourglass, and the sands within shifted, glowing with unease. Cronos closed his eyes, searching the depths of the flow. He could see the pattern of existence stretching before him, the past, the present, and the infinite spirals of what was yet to come. And there, in one faint thread of golden light, he saw a disturbance, a curve where there should have been a line, a pulse where there should have been silence, a heartbeat. The Titan frowned. He followed the thread through the labyrinth of eternity, his consciousness piercing the veils of reality like a blade of dawn through fog. He saw the hidden world, small, insignificant compared to the vastness of his dominion, yet radiant with defiance. And deep within it he saw a light. Was familiar. Too familiar. The realization struck him like a star collapsing in his chest. The child, the prophecy, lived. His hunger tightened into rage, a rage cold and infinite, the fury of inevitability defied. The very rhythm of time trembled under the weight of it. Beneath the mountain Zeus awoke. The walls of the cave quivered as thunder whispered through his bones. He did not know why, but he felt it, the gaze of eternity turning upon him. The nymphs fell to their knees in terror. The light that shone from the child flared, wild and uncontrolled. For a moment, it seemed as though the mountain itself would crumble under the pressure of two opposing wills, the will of the Father and the will of the Son. But then silence. The storm faded. Cronos withdrew. He could not see clearly, could not reach the world where the child lay hidden. The veil of Rhea's deception, woven with the threads of the river itself, blurred his vision. Yet he knew. He knew. He returned to his throne, his form flickering like an eclipse of gold and shadow. He sat in silence for 1,000 years, the seconds dripping from his fingers like blood. He spoke to no one, not even to Rhea. The stars held their light, the worlds dared not turn. And in that stillness, fear became obsession. He vowed that the prophecy would never come to pass. He would find the child. He would end the threat before it was born into power. He would silence the flow itself if he must. Time, once the rhythm of creation, became the instrument of tyranny. Meanwhile, in the cavern beneath the mountain, Zeus continued to grow. The nymphs whispered stories of the world above, of light and shadow, of gods and stars, of the endless turning of the great wheel. They told him of his father, the Titan who devoured his own blood to preserve his crown. They spoke softly, never daring to name him aloud, for even names could echo through the flow and reach the ears of eternity. But Zeus listened. And with every story the flame within him grew brighter. He began to see visions, not of the past but of what could be. He saw the Titans in their golden halls, the hourglass shattering, the river of time bursting from its cage. He saw the heavens aflame, and from the ashes, a new order rising, one that pulsed not with fear but with freedom. He did not understand the visions, but he felt them deep within, as if the universe itself whispered, "You are coming." Each day his power grew. Each breath he took bent the air, each thought stirred the clouds. The mountain trembled when he dreamed. And the nymphs began to see it in him, the shape of destiny forming like a storm upon the horizon. He was no longer the hidden child. He was the pulse of the inevitable. The current had chosen its champion. And far above, in the hollow heart of eternity, Cronos felt the first tremor of rebellion take form. The sands in his great hourglass faltered, pausing mid-descent. For the first time since the dawn of time they hesitated. And in that hesitation the end began. The mountain slumbered, but within it, the pulse of destiny grew louder. Each century beneath its roots was a heartbeat, and each heartbeat brought the child of prophecy closer to awakening. Zeus no longer appeared as an infant god. His form had taken the grace of youth, radiant and powerful, his skin glimmering with the gold of lightning and the silver of clouds. He had outgrown the cradle of stone, the cave of shadows. He stood now among the nymphs as one who had always existed, his voice carrying the calm of thunder before the storm. When he walked, the cavern's waters stirred, When he breathed, the air trembled. The nymphs watched him with awe, for the world itself seemed to listen. Even the wind that whispered through the mountain peaks carried his name in silence. But Zeus did not yet understand what he was meant to be. He felt power within him, wild, infinite, boundless, but he had no shape for it, no purpose. At times, he would look toward the surface, feeling the pull of something vast and unseen, and the question would echo within him. Why was I hidden? The nymphs would not answer. Their duty was not to explain, only to protect. But silence cannot still the heart of destiny. One day, as he sat beside the glowing pool where the stars reflected like scattered embers, Zeus felt a presence stir, not one of the nymphs but something older. The water began to ripple, though no wind moved. A voice rose from the depths, soft as a sigh, vast as eternity. You were not hidden, child of the storm, it said. You were planted. Zeus stood, his gaze steady, his pulse quickening. He saw no face in the water, only the reflection of light bending, forming spirals that glowed and faded. Planted, the voice continued, as the seed that breaks the stone. The mountain is not your prison, it is your soil. The words settled into him like thunder rolling across an endless horizon. He felt the truth of them ignite within his blood. He was not meant to remain in darkness. He was the movement that follows stillness. The river that returns when the drought has forgotten rain. The reflection faded, and the water grew calm again. But Zeus did not return to his rest. He began to walk the length of the cave, tracing the glowing veins in the walls with his fingertips, feeling the hum of the world. And for the first time he understood. The world was waiting for him. Far above, in the halls of Cronos, the Lord of Time felt the tremor. It was faint, a single note in the great symphony of eternity, yet it resonated through him with the weight of destiny. The sands in the hourglass quivered. The current rippled. Something was moving beneath the surface. Cronos turned his gaze toward the void where his vision failed. The hidden corner of existence Rhea had veiled from his sight. He could not pierce it, but he could feel the pulse of motion within it. It was growing stronger. It was calling him. Rage flared within him like fire across the sea. He had ruled without question since the dawn of time. He had bent creation to his will, silenced fate itself, imprisoned his own children in the corridors of his being. He had broken the flow. How, then, could something still move? The question was not one of reason but of fear. And fear, in the heart of eternity, becomes destruction. Cronos rose from his throne. His form stretched across the cosmos, his head brushing the crown of the stars, his feet sinking into the rivers of existence. He lifted his hand, and the hourglass of the universe trembled. The sands within turned crimson, glowing like molten gold. He spoke, and his voice was the sound of time cracking. No current flows without my will. The stars dimmed. Galaxies slowed. The rhythm of creation faltered. Every living motion in existence felt the weight of his declaration. But deep beneath the mountain, Zeus did not kneel. He felt the pressure of that voice echo through the stone, through the veins of gold, through the air he breathed, and he stood firm. For the first time he pushed back. He clenched his hands, and the air around him flashed white. Bolts of lightning leapt from his fingertips, striking the walls of the cavern. The gold veins blazed with light, and the mountain roared like a living creature awakening from 1,000 years' sleep. Above, the clouds thickened. The wind screamed. The heavens stirred. The silence of Cronos cracked, not broken yet, but wounded. And in that wound the future began to bleed through. Rhea, who had hidden herself in the veils of the outer cosmos, felt the storm rise and knew the time had come. For centuries she had waited, watching her husband's dominion decay beneath its own perfection. Now she saw the first fracture in the armor of eternity, and she knew it was her son's doing. She reached out through the flow, her presence like soft silver light drifting across the currents. She found Zeus in his cavern, his eyes bright with the fury of awakening. She did not appear before him in form, for to reveal herself would have drawn the gaze of Cronos. Instead, she spoke through the current, the voice of the mother carried in the river of existence. "You are not bound by the flow, my child," the voice whispered through the storm. "You are the flow." Zeus closed his eyes and listened. The lightning dimmed, but the power within him only deepened, steadier now, controlled. The cave no longer felt like a prison, but like the center of a gathering storm. "The time will come," the voice continued, "when the river must turn against its source. When you hear the call, rise from the depths. Claim what was stolen from you. Free those who sleep in darkness." Then the voice faded, and the silence that followed was vast and sacred. Zeus stood still, the echoes of her words burning in his mind. He looked toward the surface, toward the world he had never seen. And in the reflection of the cave's glowing pool, he saw the sky open. He saw himself standing against his father. He saw the stars torn apart by thunder. He saw victory, and the cost of it. For even the river that breaks free must still return to the sea. Above, Cronos sat in silence once more. His fury had calmed into something colder, calculation. He could feel the inevitable rising beneath him. The sands in the hourglass continued to fall, and with each grain the image of his downfall grew clearer. He closed his eyes and whispered into the void. "If the flow would rise against me, I will swallow the river once again." And the shadows of his thoughts began to move, vast, ancient, and terrible, preparing for the war that even time could not prevent. The mountain no longer slept. The stone that had once sealed Zeus within now hummed with life, its walls breathing in rhythm with the pulse of the god it concealed. The air crackled with quiet thunder. Each droplet of water that fell from the cave ceiling shimmered like liquid lightning before it touched the ground. The storm was gathering. Zeus stood at the mouth of the cavern for the first time. The air of the upper world was sharp and cold, filled with the scent of stone and storm. Above him, the sky stretched endless and blue, a vast expanse that seemed to call his name in silence. He stepped forward and the clouds trembled. The nymphs who had raised him watched from the shadows, their faces radiant with awe and sorrow. They had tended to him since the beginning, yet they knew this was the moment of departure, the moment when a god leaves the sanctuary of his birth and becomes the force the universe has awaited. They bowed their heads, their tears falling like silver rain. "Go," whispered one of them, though her voice never touched the air. It was a thought cast into the current, carried by love. "Go before the storm breaks." Zeus looked back once. He saw the darkness of the cavern behind him, the cradle of his hidden years, and for a fleeting instant, he felt the weight of both gratitude and farewell. Then he turned toward the sky, and the world welcomed him with thunder. The heavens opened. Lightning streaked across the clouds in spirals of gold and white, forming the shape of wings. The wind rose, swirling around him like a crown. Every element that had ever been, air, water, fire, earth, and the secret rhythm of time itself, bowed to his awakening. The mountain shuddered, its peaks splitting as light poured from its veins. The seas far below rippled with waves that shone like molten glass. Creatures that had never known sound lifted their heads to the thunder and felt awe for the first time. Even the stars high in the void burned brighter, for the universe could sense it. A new force had entered the pattern. Zeus stood at the summit, his eyes reflecting the entire sky. He felt the pulse of every living thing, the whisper of every current. And in that infinite heartbeat, he heard something else. A cry buried deep within the flow, a chorus of voices bound and silenced long ago. He did not yet know their names, but he felt their pain. They were his siblings, the children of Cronos, swallowed and forgotten, still dreaming in the dark. He clenched his fists and thunder answered. "I will find you," he thought, though words meant nothing in the language of gods. "I will open the prison of time." The storm roared its approval. Far away in the realm of Cronos, the Eternal One stirred. He felt the tremor through the bones of existence, the sharp fracture of order beneath the weight of a new rhythm. It began as a murmur, then grew, a sound like waves crashing against an ancient shore. The river he had tried to still was moving again. He turned his gaze toward the flow and saw it, the golden current he had buried, rising through the darkness like a flame through smoke. It was unstoppable, bright, alive. And at its heart stood the child he thought he had consumed. Cronos rose, the universe trembling beneath his motion. His armor of light cracked, his crown dimmed, the endless hourglass that hung before him faltered. The sands no longer obeyed their master. They spiraled upward, breaking the law of gravity, twisting in defiance of their maker. He reached for them, his vast hands clutching at the impossible, but they slipped through his fingers, turning to starlight and laughter. He could hear it now, the sound of rebellion, the song of freedom, the melody of motion that had once belonged only to him. He roared, and the roar shook galaxies from their orbits. Time itself quaked. But the flow did not stop. In the farthest reaches of the cosmos, Rhea stood between the stars. Her radiance had dimmed with sorrow, but her resolve burned brighter than ever. She could feel the storm her son had unleashed. She could feel the fear rising within her husband's heart. The balance had shifted. It was time. She stretched out her hand, and from the void came the ancient river, the current that even Cronos could not fully bind. It flowed through her fingers like liquid gold, warm and alive. She bent it, shaped it, whispered to it, words not of command but of permission. And the river obeyed. It rushed forth, coiling through the fabric of eternity until it reached the prison of Cronos, the hollow depths where the swallowed gods still slept. The current brushed against them like a mother's hand, and one by one they began to stir. Hestia, the warmth of the hearth, opened her eyes and breathed. Demeter's touch brought green fire to the void. Hera's gaze ignited purpose. Hades rose in shadow and calm, his eyes deep as the abyss. Poseidon awoke with a crash like the breaking of waves. The children of time were waking. Their heartbeats joined the rhythm of the storm. Above, the sky split open. Zeus raised his arms, and from his fingertips leapt the first pure bolt of lightning, white, blinding, endless. It struck the heavens, and from that wound poured light enough to make the stars themselves retreat. The bolt traveled across the cosmos, striking the realm of Cronos. It did not destroy, but it revealed, peeling back the illusion of perfection that had hidden the Titan's fear. The light reached the throne, and for the first time, Cronos saw himself clearly. He saw the cracks in his own eternity. He saw the weight of the ages he had devoured. He saw the prison he had built not only for his children but for himself. The realization was agony. But within that agony the prophecy spoke once more louder than ever. That which rules must yield. Cronos fell to one knee, the endless armor of his being fracturing into rivers of molten light. He could feel the cycle closing around him, the same cycle he had once shaped with his own hand. And from the depths of his own soul came the sound of breaking chains. Rhea watched from the veil between worlds, tears of starlight on her cheeks. Her heart ached with both grief and pride. She knew what must come next, that the river she had freed would drown the age she had known. But this was the law of eternity, the death of the old gives life to the new. She whispered into the current, her voice soft and steady. Flow, my son. Flow until the cage is broken. Flow until the stars remember how to move. And the river obeyed. The hourglass shattered. Its sands poured into the void, swirling in wild, luminous streams. Every grain became a world, every world a moment, every moment a memory. Time was no longer contained, it was free. Cronos rose once more, his face turned toward the rising storm. He was no longer the master of the flow, but he would not go quietly. He lifted his hands, calling upon the last fragments of his dominion, and the cosmos held its breath. For the first time since the dawn of creation, there would be war. The sky no longer held its shape. The storm that Zeus had summoned tore through the heavens, unraveling constellations, bending light, shattering the stillness that had once ruled the cosmos. Lightning danced across eternity like veins of fire, carving new paths through the dark. And at the heart of the storm stood the son of prophecy, radiant, unyielding, alive. Zeus rose from the summit of the mountain, his cloak of storm clouds flowing like a river of night. Around him thunder coiled, awaiting his command. He looked toward the firmament above, and through the veil of wind and fire he saw it. The throne of Cronos, suspended between worlds, the hourglass shattered at its feet. He did not need to be told what must come next. The current had already decided. The river would return to its source. He lifted his hand and the storm obeyed. Bolts of light stretched across the sky, forming a bridge between earth and the stars. He stepped onto it, and with each stride the air trembled beneath his power. The sound of his ascent echoed through all creation. The first footsteps of rebellion, the first beat of a new age. Cronos waited. He sat upon his broken throne, the void around him rippling with dread. The golden armor that had once shone with the brilliance of eternity was cracked and dull. The light that had flowed through him now leaked away in slow, pulsing streams. He could feel time slipping through his grasp like sand through open fingers. Yet even as the flow abandoned him, pride remained. He was the first, the eternal, the architect of motion itself. And if he was to fall, he would fall as the cosmos had risen, in fire and thunder. He rose and the universe trembled. The last fragments of his dominion coalesced around him, the remnants of endless ages, the echoes of stars long dead. They gathered into his hands, forming the blade of eternity, the scythe that had once carved the river of time. Its edge glowed with the color of dying suns. He lifted it to the sky and the void split open. Galaxies turned upon their axes. Suns flared and burned out. Even the current of destiny wavered for a heartbeat. And then he spoke, his voice filling every corner of creation. If I am to be undone, let eternity bleed with me. Zeus emerged from the storm, wreathed in light. The two stood across from one another, father and son, beginning and end. No words passed between them. They did not need them. Their thoughts collided in the silence between lightning strikes. The air thickened. The stars held their breath. Then the first bolt struck. Zeus raised his hand and thunder answered. Cronos swung his scythe, and the blade tore through the fabric of existence. The collision was beyond sound, a roar that consumed thought, a brilliance that blinded creation itself. Worlds shattered in their orbits, time fractured and reformed. The war of gods had begun. They clashed across the sky, their movements shaping the future. Each strike of Cronos's blade split the heavens, sending rivers of starlight spilling into the void. Each bolt from Zeus's hands forged new stars, burning bright with defiance. Creation itself was their battlefield. Rhea watched from the veil between worlds, her light flickering in sorrow and awe. She had known this moment would come, but even she could not bear the weight of it, the sight of her love and her son destroying all she had helped to build. The nymphs wept. The titans stirred in their prisons, feeling the tremor of fate approaching. And far below, in the worlds yet unborn, the first sparks of mortal souls dreamed of thunder and light. Cronos fought with fury unmatched. He was time itself, every moment, every ending, every inevitability. His strikes carried the gravity of eons, the despair of stars that knew their deaths before their births. But Zeus was not bound by his rhythm. He moved with freedom, unpredictability, the power of change. Every strike that should have ended him became the opening of another path. Every blow that struck him fed the storm within. Lightning met eternity. The sky burned. And at last Cronos faltered. He fell to one knee, the scythe slipping from his grasp. Its blade dissolved into fragments of gold that drifted upward, forming the pattern of a new constellation. The first map of fate. Zeus stood over him, his breath slow, steady, heavy with the echo of all that had passed. The storm around him began to still, the lightning fading into quiet silver light. He looked upon his father, and what he felt was not triumph, but understanding. Cronos lifted his gaze. The eyes that had once seen every moment now saw only one, the face of his own future. He spoke, his voice softer now, the weight of creation trembling through each word. You are not my end, child. You are my continuation. Zeus nodded. He raised his hand not to strike but to close the cycle. A final bolt of light descended, not of wrath but of renewal. It enveloped Cronos, wrapping him in a cocoon of luminous time. His form dissolved, his power scattering into the river that flowed through all things. Where he fell, the flow surged anew, brighter, freer, alive. The current of time resumed its eternal course, no longer bound by fear. Cronos was gone but not lost. His essence became the flow itself, the invisible rhythm beneath every heartbeat, every dawn, every fall of the stars. Zeus stood upon the ruins of the old throne. Around him the freed children of Cronos gathered, Hestia, Hera, Demeter, Hades, and Poseidon. Their eyes glowing with new light, their forms remade by freedom. The river whispered their names, welcoming them to the surface of existence. Together they looked upon the vast expanse of the cosmos. Broken, beautiful, unfinished. And Zeus spoke, his voice steady, carrying through all creation. Let there be movement. Let there be change. Let there be life. And the universe obeyed. The age of the Titans had ended. The age of the gods had begun. Rhea watched from the edge of time, her tears falling as comets across the newborn skies. The pain of loss mingled with the peace of renewal. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but it had not been cruel. For even in endings there was harmony. She turned her gaze to the distant horizon, where Cronos's essence shimmered as a faint golden line, and she whispered, "Sleep, beloved. The river remembers you." The current carried her words away, blending them into the endless flow. And thus ended the first cycle. The eternal had fallen, the storm had spoken, and the cosmos had begun again. From the ruins of the timeless, the world was born anew. Its heartbeat the rhythm of Cronos, its voice the thunder of Zeus, its promise the endless turning of time. The hourglass was broken, but time would forever flow. Silence followed the thunder. The storm that had torn the heavens was gone, leaving behind a sky washed clean, a vast canvas of light and ash. Fragments of stars drifted like embers across the void, each one a remnant of what had been destroyed, each one a seed of what was yet to come. Zeus stood among them, the air around him still humming with the echo of lightning. The war was over. Cronos had fallen. And for the first time since the birth of eternity, the cosmos stood unbound. The freed gods gathered around him. Hestia's warmth steady as sunrise, Poseidon's laughter rising with the waves, Hera's gaze sharp and knowing. They looked to their brother, the one born from secrecy and storm, and they saw in him not merely a victor but a beginning. He lifted his hand. From his palms spilled a thread of pure light, the residue of the broken hourglass. It twisted and turned in the air, finding rhythm and freedom, forming the first constellations of the new age. Each star pulsed once, a promise, a memory, a heartbeat of what Cronos had been. Zeus felt it, his father's essence woven through the flow. Cronos was gone yet not gone. He lingered within the rhythm of time itself, his presence now soft as a whisper, deep as the current beneath all things. Zeus closed his eyes and bowed his head. He did not hate him. How could he? Without Cronos there would be no river, no flow, no dawn for him to stand beneath. Even in defeat, the Father had left the gift of motion, and motion was life. The silence of reflection ended as a great wind swept through the heavens. It was not chaos but renewal. Galaxies began to turn again. The stars resumed their slow, eternal dance. The world was breathing once more. Zeus looked upon it and spoke, his voice calm yet vast, echoing through every horizon. Let the order of time endure. Not as chains but as rhythm. Let creation move freely, yet remember its origin. The flow shimmered in answer. From his words rose the ages, the unseen measures by which the cosmos would henceforth grow and decay, flourish and fade. They would give meaning to the motion Cronos had begun, not endless but cyclical. Hera approached him, her form radiant, her voice clear as glass. "And who shall guard this rhythm?" she asked. Zeus turned his gaze to the horizon. Beyond the stars, the faint outline of Cronos's spirit shimmered, not vengeful, not gone, but patient. Watching. "He will," Zeus said softly. "The eternal does not die, it becomes." The others were silent. They did not understand, not yet. But Zeus did. For he could still feel the pulse of his father in every second that passed, in every spark that fell, in every heartbeat that began. He looked upon the newborn universe and whispered, almost to himself, "Even endings must be remembered. Even gods must honor time." And as he spoke, a single star ignited brighter than the rest. The star of Cronos, eternal witness to all that moves and all that ends. In the quiet that followed victory, the universe waited. The storm had passed, but the sky was hollow, vast, raw, and formless. The gods looked upon it and felt the weight of beginning, the burden of shaping what had no shape. Zeus stood at the heart of the void, his eyes reflecting the faint glow of scattered stars. He raised his hand, and from the residue of thunder, light poured forth. Long streams of silver and gold that curved into spirals, weaving the fabric of the heavens. He drew breath, and with that breath came sky. It stretched beyond sight, endless and blue, the first true boundary between what was above and what would lie below. His voice followed, low and deep, carrying across the emptiness. Let there be height, that all may look upward. The sky answered in silence, and its silence became peace. From his palm he cast another spark, and where it struck, Poseidon laughed. The god of the deep unfurled his arms, and from his laughter spilled oceans, vast, living expanses that mirrored the sky's calm yet hid fury beneath. Their waves spoke the language of rhythm, the same rhythm that once belonged to Cronos. Zeus smiled. You will rule motion, brother, but you will remember time. Poseidon bowed, his trident carving whirlpools that glittered like galaxies in water. Then Hades emerged from the shadow that lingered beneath all light. Where his gaze fell, the ground solidified, stone forming from chaos, mountains rising like thoughts from the deep. He looked at his brother and said nothing. Zeus nodded. You will guard what lies beneath. In darkness, the memory of all things shall rest. The three stood together, sky, sea, and stone, the first harmony of the new age. And as they breathed, the world took form. Demeter walked among the rising plains, her steps leaving trails of green. Each movement of her hand birthed forests, fields, and the quiet pulse of life. Flowers bloomed where she looked, rivers ran where she sighed. Her laughter filled the air with warmth, the promise of growth, of seasons yet to come. Beside her moved Hestia, the quiet flame. From her heart came the first fire, gentle, sacred, a light meant not to destroy but to gather around. She placed it upon the earth, saying nothing, and its glow spread across the land, reaching homes that did not yet exist, hearts that were not yet born. And Hera, serene and proud, lifted her hand to the sky. Stars aligned at her will, finding pattern and order. Constellations formed, mapping destiny itself, a reminder that even freedom needs direction. Zeus watched them all and felt a rare calm. The war had been chaos, but creation was harmony, the melody his father's silence had never known. He saw how each god moved according to their nature, yet together they formed something greater, balance. But beneath that balance something stirred, faint, distant, familiar. A pulse hidden in the heartbeat of time. The whisper of the one who had come before. Zeus looked to the horizon where light met shadow. For an instant he saw it, the faint outline of a figure, golden and vast, standing at the edge of the flow. Cronos. No longer in flesh, no longer in form, but present in rhythm. Watching. Waiting. Zeus did not speak. He simply raised his hand, and the wind carried his unspoken thought. I know you remain. And when my time comes, I will yield as you did. Then he turned away. The world continued to form, and time, patient, invisible, began its next circle. From the harmony of sea and stone, of earth and flame, Zeus raised his gaze to the heavens. The stars spun in slow, perfect rhythm, yet he felt the need for a center, a place where will and order could dwell. The world had shape now, but no voice to guide it. And so he began the ascent. He climbed through the endless layers of sky, higher than clouds, higher than storms, until he reached the realm where air turned to light. There he forged his dwelling, not a palace of gold but a fortress of thunder, woven from wind and eternity's pulse. Upon its peak he set his throne. The air shimmered around it, charged with the breath of the storm. Beneath, the world moved in rhythm with his thought. Tides rose, mountains exhaled, lightning bloomed from silence. It was not dominion born of conquest but of balance. He ruled not over life but over motion. From this seat, he could see all things: the bright curve of oceans, the slow turn of constellations, the sleeping depths of Hades's realm. He saw harmony, and for a moment he believed it could last. The gods gathered around him. Poseidon from the waves, Hades from the shadows, Hera radiant beside the stars. Demeter's fields glowed below, and Hestia's fires burned wherever warmth was needed. It was the first council of heaven. Each swore not fealty but kinship, a vow to maintain the flow that had once been broken. Zeus accepted their oaths and spoke, "Let this be the order of the new age, that none shall bind the river, that all shall serve its rhythm." His words carried through the heavens, and the stars themselves seemed to bow in agreement. Yet in the quiet that followed, a faint tremor ran through the air, small, almost imperceptible, but enough to darken Zeus's gaze. He turned toward the far horizon and saw the faint shimmer of something vast and golden, rippling through the folds of time. Cronos's echo. The flow that once obeyed now whispered beyond his reach. It moved on its own, alive, remembering. For time had learned independence from its maker, and it would never again belong to one will alone. Zeus clenched his hand, and thunder rolled softly in answer. He did not fear it. He only understood. Every reign carries its shadow. Every throne is carved from impermanence. He looked down upon the world, new, bright, full of promise, and spoke to the wind as if to his unseen father. The cycle turns again. When my age fades, may I yield with grace. The storm quieted. The stars resumed their dance. And beneath Olympus, the earth began to hum with life, the heartbeat of mortals yet to come. The world was no longer silent. Wind moved across the oceans, mountains sang with rivers, forests whispered their green hymns to the sky. Yet in all this beauty something was missing, a voice that could wonder. Zeus watched the earth from his throne of thunder. He saw the seas crash against the shore, the fire of Hestia glow within the stones, the gentle rhythm of Demeter's endless bloom. All was perfect yet lifeless. The world had motion but not memory. He called to his kin, and the air trembled as the gods gathered. Poseidon emerged from the waves, foam still clinging to his hair. Hades rose from the deep caverns, quiet as thought. Hera descended with the stars trailing behind her, radiant and measured. Demeter came with the scent of harvest, and Hestia with the glow of hearthlight. Together they looked upon the world, vast, green, and silent. "The earth moves," said Demeter, "but it does not know. The sea breathes," said Poseidon, "but it does not dream." Zeus listened, his gaze turned inward. He had heard the same absence echoing through the current of time, a gap, a pause, a waiting. Something longed to exist that was neither God nor void. He reached down to the soil. Between his fingers, the dust shimmered with the remnants of Cronos's light, the subtle gold of eternity's first fire. He pressed it together, and from it took form, not divine, not immortal, but aware. He shaped a figure that could look upon creation and wonder at it. A being that could live and die, rise and fall, remember and forget. A creature born not to rule but to reflect. And so, beneath the gaze of gods, mortals were born. Their hearts beat with borrowed thunder. Their eyes carried the faint echo of the stars. Their voices trembled with the same rhythm that flowed through all time. They were fragile, but in their fragility lay power, the power to choose, to hope, to change. Hera looked upon them and frowned. "They are too small," she said. "They will not endure." But Zeus only smiled. "They are the proof that time moves forward. Even the smallest flame carries the memory of the sun." He breathed upon them, and the breath became spirit. They opened their eyes and saw the sky for the first time, saw light, shadow, beauty, and fear. They bowed not because they were commanded to, but because awe was their first language. The gods watched in silence. In that single act, the universe changed again. Time had found its witnesses. From the depths, Hades watched their lives unfold, their births and deaths, their fleeting joys. He saw meaning where others saw endings. Poseidon taught them the rhythm of tides, the pull of uncertainty. Demeter gave them seed and harvest, promise and loss. Hestia gave them fire, warmth against the cold, light against the dark. And Hera gave them law, not chains but the order that allows freedom to exist. Zeus watched it all from Olympus, silent. He could feel the flow of time move faster now, spiraling outward. Every mortal life was a spark, brief yet bright, pushing the river onward. He realized then that eternity had found its heart. Yet somewhere deep within that flow he felt it again. The faint, patient rhythm that was not his own. Cronos. Not as a presence of wrath or vengeance, but as the pulse beneath every mortal heartbeat. A reminder that even gods must one day fade. And that time, eternal and gentle, would cradle them all. Night came for the first time. Not the silence of the void, but a gentle shadow drawn across the newborn world, a promise of rest. The mortals lay beneath the stars, their bodies still unsure of their rhythm, their minds caught between awe and fear. They closed their eyes and the universe discovered dreams. Within those fragile minds the world was born again each night. Mountains spoke, rivers sang, stars danced closer to the earth. In dreams, mortals became creators. And though their visions vanished with the dawn, they left traces in the flow of time. Tiny, shimmering ripples that even the gods could feel. Zeus stood upon Olympus and watched. The dreams of mortals rose to him like smoke, delicate and bright. He saw their hopes take shape, the wish for warmth, for safety, for love, and for something they did not yet have a name for, meaning. He turned to Hera, who watched beside him, and said quietly, "They see the world as we never could. In their weakness lies creation." Hera's eyes were sharp as moonlight. "And in creation lies disobedience." Zeus said nothing. He knew she was right. Where there is thought, there is will. Where there is will, there is defiance. He looked again at the mortals. Among them, one sat apart, a figure of clay and light, staring at the horizon long after the others had slept. A spark burned within his gaze, restless and curious. He was not content to dream only while sleeping. He wanted to shape. The gods saw it. They watched as the mortal gathered stones, as he learned to shape them into tools, as he drew images of fire and stars upon the ground. And from that small act, the first idea was born. The world trembled, not with fear but with recognition. For in that moment, the river of time curved again. A new current formed, not divine, not eternal, but mortal and infinite in its hunger. Hestia smiled softly. "They create as we did." Poseidon frowned. "And one day they will destroy as we did." Zeus listened and felt both pride and unease. The mortals were mirrors, each one a reflection of what the gods could never be, fleeting, imperfect, alive. He raised his hand to the sky. Lightning traced across the clouds, illuminating the night. The mortals looked up and saw the light, and in it they saw him, not as a distant ruler but as a symbol of something greater than themselves. They named him, and in that naming faith was born. Zeus felt the echo of their voices ripple through the heavens. Adoration, gratitude, fear. Their belief strengthened him, yet also chained him. For the moment a god is worshipped, he is no longer free. The cycle turned once more. Creation had birthed worship, and worship would one day birth rebellion. In the far reaches of time, Cronos's whisper drifted through the current. Soft, inevitable, patient. So it begins again. The days of peace stretched long and golden. Mortals built homes beside rivers, sang beneath the stars, and kindled fires that glowed like tiny suns. The gods watched from above, proud and distant, believing the world had found its harmony. But harmony is never still. It trembles, waiting for change. Among the mortals walked one whose heart beat louder than the rest. Prometheus, the thinker, the questioner, the one who looked upon the heavens and dared to ask why. He saw the gods in the clouds, in the thunder, in the waves, and wondered why the divine kept its power apart from those below. Why must the light stay in the sky when darkness ruled the earth? One night, as the cold winds swept through the valleys, Prometheus looked into the dying embers of a mortal hearth and whispered, "We are made from their breath. Then why do we shiver?" The words were small, but the current of time carried them upward. Zeus heard them. He stood upon Olympus, thunder stirring at his fingertips, the faintest shadow in his gaze. Hestia, ever gentle, spoke beside him. They seek warmth, not war. Zeus's voice was low, wary. Warmth becomes power, and power becomes defiance. Below, Prometheus raised his eyes to the storm and felt no fear. He saw the lightning that crowned the sky, saw fire born of gods, and in that light he understood. The gift of the heavens could belong to the earth. When the storm passed, he climbed the mountains until his hands bled and his breath failed. At the peak, he reached toward the remnants of the clouds, and there, hidden within the silence between thunderclaps, he stole a single spark of divine fire. He carried it back wrapped in the hollow of a reed, its light small but eternal. And when he placed it in mortal hands, the night was broken. Fire spread across the earth, warmth, light, creation. But also weapon, will, rebellion. The gods saw the glow and knew. Zeus rose from his throne, the air around him crackling with fury and awe. He saw the mortals dancing around the flames, their faces lit by power that once belonged only to him. And he whispered not to the others but to the wind. So the cycle turns. Hera's voice followed, sharp as the edge of glass. He has defied Olympus. Let him suffer as his father did. Zeus was silent for a long moment. He remembered Cronos, the fear, the defiance, the fall. He had promised himself he would not become that. Yet now he understood why his father had trembled before the future. Still, the law of balance could not be broken without consequence. He raised his hand and the sky darkened. Prometheus was taken by the wind, carried to the edge of the world, to a peak where earth meets cloud, where thunder never ceases. There he was bound not by cruelty but by law. The chains that held him were not metal but rhythm, the rhythm of consequence. Each day the fire within him burned, each night it renewed, unending. Punishment and purpose became one. Zeus looked down upon him and spoke softly, "You have given them my light. May they use it better than I did. The storm calmed. The world glowed with firelight, proof that rebellion once born cannot be unmade. And far beneath the layers of time, Cronos's voice stirred again, quiet, patient, eternal. Even gods learn what I learned. The river never obeys. The fire of Prometheus spread like dawn across the world. From one trembling hand to another, it passed, not just warmth, but awakening. The mortals learned to forge metal from stone, to shape the earth, to defy the night. They built homes and altars, but also walls and weapons. They looked upon the sky not with fear, but with memory. Zeus watched in silence from his throne of clouds. The flame that once belonged to the gods now burned in the valleys below, reflected in the eyes of those who had never known power. He could feel it in the rhythm of the world. Time moving faster, hearts beating louder, dreams reaching higher. Fire had made them more than children. It had made them creators. Poseidon saw it first. Cities rising near the coasts, mortal ships daring the open sea. Hades felt it in the underworld, souls arriving with stories, songs, and regrets. Demeter watched their fields stretch farther, their harvests richer. And Hera, ever wary, felt reverence turn to question, question to pride. She turned to Zeus, her voice cool as starlight. They honor us still, but not as they once did. They speak our names, but they no longer bow. Zeus did not answer at once. He watched a single spark drift upward, carried by the wind. A fragment of mortal fire that vanished into the night sky, becoming one with the stars. Let them stand, he said at last. If we gave them breath, let them learn to use it. We were born from eternity, they are born from struggle. And struggle is the purest prayer. The words carried both pride and melancholy. He saw in their fire the reflection of his own rebellion, the same defiance that had unmade his father's age. He knew then what all gods must someday know. No throne is eternal, no dominion absolute. Even immortality bends to the rhythm of change. The sky rumbled, soft and distant. Zeus turned his gaze beyond the horizon, toward the deep pulse of time itself. There, in the quiet current beneath all things, he felt it again. Cronos' steady heartbeat. Not a threat, not a ghost, but a reminder. The river still flowed. The cycle still turned. And far below, in the mortal world, a child looked up at the thunder and smiled, believing the storm itself could hear his voice. It was a small gesture. But in that smile lay the promise of ages yet to come, and of gods who would one day walk the earth again as shadows of their own myths. Zeus closed his eyes and whispered to the wind, "May they never stop reaching upward." The thunder rolled in answer, a sound not of anger but of blessing. The second age had ended. The reign of gods was secure. But the fire of mortals had already begun to shape the next dawn. And in the silence between lightning strikes, the voice of time spoke once more. The future waits, as it always has. A golden peace stretched across the heavens. The world was full, its seas deep and bright, its mountains crowned with fire and mist. The gods reigned from Olympus in calm harmony, their laughter carried by the wind. Mortals thrived below, their cities rising like jewels upon the earth, their prayers ascending like smoke toward the sky. For a time all was balance, but even perfection carries a shadow. The longer it lasts, the heavier it becomes. Zeus felt it first, not as a storm but as silence. The thunder that once answered his will grew faint, the lightning slower to obey. He stood upon his throne and looked down upon the world that he had shaped, and though it glimmered with beauty, He sensed the invisible decay that comes not from chaos, but from stillness. Immortality, he realized, was its own burden. To live without end is to walk forever in circles. The gods could not die, yet they could not change, and in that unchanging state the seeds of fate began to stir. Hera, queen of the sky, noticed it too. The offerings from the temples grew fewer, the prayers quieter. Mortals had learned to rely on themselves. Their fire, their tools, their will, all born from the gift once stolen, now made their world flourish without constant divine hand. She turned to Zeus, her eyes sharp as the edge of dawn. They forget us. Zeus's gaze remained on the horizon. No, he said softly, they remember too well. They have seen our anger, our distance, our pride. Now they seek their own way through the storm. Hera's tone hardened. And when they no longer look upward, what will become of the heavens? Zeus had no answer. For he too had begun to wonder what purpose remained for the gods once mortals no longer needed them. In the deep halls of the underworld, Hades watched the passing of souls. Once the dead had come in awe, whispering prayers even in their final breath. Now they arrived weary but unafraid, their spirits calm, their eyes filled with understanding. They had accepted death as part of life, and in that acceptance Hades saw something almost divine. He stood beside the silent river and murmured to the shadows, "They learn faster than we expected." The shade said nothing, but the water rippled as if in agreement. The current of time flowed even here beneath the earth, steady, patient, unbroken. And though Hades ruled endings, he could not help but feel that the end was now beginning above. Zeus walked the gardens of Olympus alone. The stars above him pulsed faintly, like the slowing heartbeat of a great creature. He touched the air and felt it tremble, not from fear but from fatigue. The world he had built was too stable. It lacked the motion that once gave it life. Cronos's lesson returned to him. To stop time is to end it. He looked toward the horizon where day met night and whispered, "Perhaps eternity must break again." And as if in answer, the wind shifted. The rhythm of the world faltered, just slightly, almost imperceptibly. But Zeus felt it deep in his bones. The first crack in the golden age had appeared. Far beyond Olympus, in the vast quiet between stars, the river of time curved gently upon itself. And within its eternal current, the essence of Cronos drifted, silent, waiting. He had no form, no will, only awareness. He felt the weariness of the gods, the restlessness of mortals, and the slow tightening of the cycle. And though he could not speak, the current carried his thought through all creation. Peace is the heaviest chain. The words reached the dreams of Zeus as he slept that night. He awoke with thunder in his breath and a memory that was not his own, the feeling of a crown too heavy to bear. He rose, walked to the edge of Olympus, and looked down upon the mortal fires glowing like constellations across the earth. Their light was small, fragile, but alive. And for the first time since his victory over Cronos, Zeus felt something he had long forgotten: fear. The silence of Olympus began to change. It was subtle at first, the pause before thunder, the stillness before a tide turns. But to the gods, who had lived since before silence itself, it was unmistakable. Something ancient was moving beneath the world. Zeus stood at the edge of the clouds, watching the horizon blur where day met dusk. Below, mortal cities flickered with firelight, thousands of tiny suns scattered across the earth. They had built temples higher than mountains, their spires reaching toward the sky not in devotion, but in imitation. The gods were no longer their masters. they were their reflection. Hera stood beside him, her eyes cold as marble. They build towers to touch the heavens. Soon they will think themselves gods. Zeus did not answer. He could not deny the truth. He felt the same tremor that she did, a rhythm in the world that was not divine but born of human hands, of will and pride. The mortals had taken their spark of fire and turned it into destiny. Below the earth Hades felt it too. The river Styx pulsed with strange energy, and the whispers of the dead grew louder. Their voices were no longer laments, they were questions. They spoke of injustice, of ambition, of dreams left unfinished. Even in death, mortals now longed for more. He walked along the shore of the underworld, his black robes trailing through the dust of forgotten ages. He paused beside the ghostly waters and said quietly, "They no longer fear us. Perhaps they never should have." And in reply the river rippled, not with words but with memory. He saw flashes of the past, Cronos devouring his children, Zeus rising in rebellion, the hourglass shattering. Every cycle began with fear. Every end began with courage. On the surface, in a quiet valley where the mountains met the sea, the first oracle was born. She was mortal, but her eyes held the pale glow of something older than life. She dreamed in symbols, her words veiled in riddles. The people gathered to hear her speak, and through her the earth itself began to murmur. "The river turns again," she whispered, "and the gods shall drink from their own reflection." Her voice spread through the lands like wind through grass, reaching kings and shepherds alike. The gods felt it, not through sound but through the shift in the current of faith. Mortals no longer prayed for protection, they prayed for answers. The tone of their devotion had changed. It no longer bowed, it questioned. Hera heard it in the air, bitter and sharp. "They forget who gave them fire." But Zeus only looked toward the mountains where the oracle spoke and said softly, "No, Hera. They remember too clearly. Fire always burns those who try to hold it." Zeus dreamed again of his father. Of Cronos standing within the endless flow, the hourglass hole once more, sands falling upward instead of down. In the dream, Cronos's voice was not wrathful but patient. "You cannot rule what moves by its own rhythm. Even eternity must learn to yield." Zeus awoke with the taste of lightning in his breath. He stood upon Olympus, the world spread beneath him like a sleeping sea. He could see everything, every spark, every life, every shadow. And yet, for all his vision, he could not see the shape of what was coming. For the first time he understood what his father had felt before him. That the greatest fear of a god is not death, but irrelevance. Far below, the oracle woke from her trance, gasping. She had seen the same vision. The sky breaking. The throne trembling. And a voice older than time whispering through the cracks. "When gods forget to listen, the earth will remind them." The sky was clear, yet the air trembled. The gods could feel it, not through thunder nor fire, but through the quiet rhythm that lived beneath every sound. Something deep within the world had begun to wake. It started as a murmur beneath mountains, a vibration too low for mortal ears. Rivers shifted their course. Roots grew restless in the soil. Animals turned their heads toward the horizon and stared as if listening to a song older than light. The earth, once silent, was speaking again. Zeus stood upon Olympus, his gaze fixed on the distant plains where clouds gathered in unnatural stillness. He knew this feeling, the same subtle pulse that once signaled his father's fall. Change was coming not from the sky this time but from below. He called upon the gods and they came, Poseidon rising from the sea, Hades from shadow, Hera radiant in stormlight, Demeter crowned with green fire. Even the lesser deities, the winds, the rivers, the dawns, gathered at the edge of his hall. Zeus spoke, and the air grew heavy with his voice. The balance shifts. The flow no longer obeys our will. The world remembers its beginning. Demeter bowed her head. The soil breathes again, she said. The mountains whisper. The seeds grow without my command. Poseidon crossed his arms, the sound of waves echoing through his tone. And the oceans rise where I have not willed it. The tides move as if drawn by another hand. Hades looked up from the shadows. The dead dream again, he said simply. They whisper of return. The words hung in the air, cold, unreal. Even immortality shivered. In the mortal world, signs appeared everywhere. The ground split open in places untouched by storms. Flames burned blue instead of red. Dreams carried voices not their own. The oracle, pale and trembling, spoke to her followers beneath the open sky. The earth stirs with memory. What was buried will rise. The age of gods will bend once more. Her words spread like fire through the kingdoms of men. Some trembled in reverence, others in defiance. Kings built higher altars, warriors forged new symbols. And in their fervor, the first great empire of mortals was born. Not in worship of Olympus, but in imitation of it. They crowned rulers as divine, built temples not to gods, but to their own glory. The divine spark had turned to ambition. Faith had become reflection. Zeus watched it all with heavy eyes. He could not deny what he saw. Mortals no longer looked upward for approval. They looked inward for purpose. The flame of Prometheus had become the torch of nations. Hera's voice broke the silence. You gave them fire. Now they burn the heavens with it. Zeus did not answer. His gaze fell upon the mountains far to the west, where the trembling of the earth grew stronger each day. Lightning flickered across the horizon, not his lightning. Something else. Something older. He closed his hand and thunder rolled like a heartbeat. It is not them, he said quietly. It is what sleeps beneath them. In the depths of the world, beyond the reach of mortal flame, the ancient pulse of the earth grew louder. It was not life. It was memory. The echo of the age before gods, before thrones, before time had a name. And within that echo, faint and slow, the voice of Cronos stirred once more. All that was buried must return. Even silence remembers. The mountains shuddered. The rivers turned. The cycle had begun again. The trembling began as a whisper beneath the world, a deep, slow heartbeat echoing through stone and shadow. The mortals called it an omen. The gods knew better. It was memory returning. In the underworld, Hades felt it first. The walls of his realm pulsed with unseen rhythm, the river Styx shivering like liquid glass. The dead stirred in their endless slumber, murmuring names long forbidden, names spoken before the rule of Zeus, before the crown of thunder, before time itself had been bound to order. He walked through the halls of silence, his footsteps echoing across the black marble of eternity. From the deepest vaults, he heard it, a low rumble, steady and ancient, like a mountain drawing breath. They are waking, he whispered. The shadows answered not in words but in motion. The air thickened, the fire dimmed, and in the darkness shapes began to stir, massive, indistinct, older than gods, older than law. The Titans. Far above, the skies turned restless. Lightning coiled around Olympus, not by Zeus's command but in warning. He stood at the edge of his throne, his gaze cast downward toward the trembling horizon. He could feel them, the echoes of his father's generation, the remnants of that first rebellion swallowed in time. Hera approached, her golden robes trailing light across the marble. "It cannot be," she said softly. "They were bound beyond the world. You sealed them yourself." Zeus's eyes were distant, troubled. "Nothing sealed within time stays buried forever. Not even gods." He turned to the horizon where mountains split the sky, and for the first time in an age, he felt fear like a spark beneath his ribs. Deep within the caverns of Tartarus, the ancient prison of eternity, chains began to crack. Each link glowed faintly with the light of broken promises. The darkness breathed, and from within it came the faint shimmer of golden light, not warmth, but memory. From that light rose the first of them, Hyperion, Lord of Sun before the sun. His eyes blazed with the fury of dawn denied. Beside him stirred Oceanus, the endless wave, and Iapetus, who once shaped the edges of the world. One by one they awoke, their voices rumbling through the stone like thunder beneath the sea. "The age turns," said Hyperion. "The sun has become the father. And the river calls to us again," murmured Oceanus. "The flow that bound us now opens." In the farthest chamber where shadow met light, a deeper silence broke. From it came a single pulse, slow, vast, eternal. The essence of Cronos, still bound but no longer asleep. His voice echoed without sound, "Rise, my kin." Not in wrath but in return. Time does not punish, it restores. The Titans answered as one. Their chains shattered, and with that sound the earth itself cried out. On Olympus, thunder exploded across the heavens. Zeus felt the surge of power beneath the world, ancient and unyielding, not against him but beyond him. The storm within him flared, instinctive and divine. Lightning split the clouds, searing the sky white. The gods gathered around him, Poseidon clutching his trident, Hera's eyes aflame, Athena standing silent, her gaze sharp as prophecy. All felt it, the world turning again. "They return to balance what we have broken," Zeus said. "This is not vengeance. It is the cycle reclaiming itself." Poseidon's voice rumbled like the sea. "And will we yield to it?" Zeus looked beyond the horizon, where the first golden light of the awakening Titans rose like dawn. "No," he said. "We will meet it and endure it. For even in return the river needs its banks." But in his heart, he knew the truth that Cronos had once whispered. No ruler can stand against the current forever. The cycle had turned once more, and the shadow of fate, silent, patient, endless, had risen from the depths. The sun rose heavier that morning. Its light no longer pure gold but tinged with red, the color of awakening power. Mortals looked to the sky and saw omens in the dawn. The rivers swelled, mountains groaned, and from the depths of the earth came the faint hum of something vast reclaiming its breath. The Titans were not yet seen, but their memory walked among men. Zeus felt it in the pulse of every storm. The air carried a weight that was not his own. Each bolt of lightning came slower, its echo dull, as if the sky itself hesitated to obey. He stood upon the heights of Olympus, his gaze fixed on the horizon where light met shadow. Beneath the clouds the world shimmered, not with life but with recollection. The age of gods was not dying, but it was no longer alone. Hera approached, her steps deliberate, her crown glinting with restrained fire. "They rise again," she said. "The children of your father. The ones he feared, the ones you conquered. Will you fight them as he did? Zeus turned his head slightly, his eyes calm but heavy. No, he said. Cronos fought to preserve himself. I will fight only to preserve balance. She studied him, silent for a moment. Balance is a fragile excuse for mercy. Below them, Poseidon stirred the seas into turmoil. Waves crashed upon the shores with unnatural fury. He could feel Oceanus moving beneath the deep, his presence vast and ancient, a tide that no trident could command. From the deepest trenches, light bloomed like dawn under water. Brother, Poseidon murmured to the waves, we share the same salt but not the same sea. In the underworld, Hades walked the caverns of shadow where the earth cracked open. Golden light seeped through the fissures, warm and blinding, bleeding from the edges of Tartarus. He felt the rhythm of it, steady, patient, familiar. Time's heartbeat returning. He closed his eyes and spoke to the void. Father of order, father of decay. You move again. Tell me, will the world end or simply begin anew? The answer came not as words but as memory. The river Styx surged, glowing for a heartbeat with light from the first dawn. The air whispered, nothing ends. Everything remembers. Zeus gathered the gods. The air thickened with their power. Lightning, wind, and flame filled the chamber. Athena stood beside her father, her eyes unblinking. If the Titans rise, she said, they rise by law, not rebellion. They are the bones of the world. To destroy them is to destroy its memory. Zeus nodded slowly. Then we will not destroy. We will contain. As time once contained us. Demeter's voice trembled like wind through leaves. And if they cannot be contained? Zeus looked out through the open arch of Olympus. The clouds had begun to glow with a color older than fire, an amber light pulsing from the horizon. Then we will learn what my father never could. We will yield before we are broken. The gods stood in silence. None spoke further. As night fell, the first of the old stars appeared in the sky, stars that had vanished when Cronos fell. They burned faintly as if remembering how to shine. The mortals below saw them and gave them names lost to time, names whispered by their ancestors before the gods had ruled. And deep within the earth, Cronos drifted through the river of his own undoing. He had no form, no chains, only memory. His voice moved through the world like the breath of wind through ancient stone. Let them rise, he murmured. Let them remember what eternity forgot. Zeus heard that whisper in his dreams. He stood once more upon the shore of nothing, where the river of time flowed in both directions, and saw the reflection of himself in its surface. For an instant he could not tell if he was the ruler or the prisoner. When he awoke, dawn had returned, red and slow. The sound of the earth's heartbeat filled the sky. The Titans were awake. The horizon burned with gold and ash. From the deepest valleys to the highest peaks, the earth trembled as the past tore its way through stone and shadow. The Titans were no longer whispers. They had risen. Mountains moved like beasts awakening. The sea lifted in walls of light, the clouds folded into storms. Mortals fell to their knees as the world beneath them seemed to breathe. The sky split open, and from it poured shapes vast and luminous, beings of ancient fire, born before the dawn of gods. Hyperion strode first, his body radiant as a dying sun. Each step scorched the ground, yet the earth did not burn, it bloomed. Behind him came Oceanus, his form shifting like the waves, his voice the sound of 10,000 tides. Iapetus followed, his skin carved from iron and memory, his eyes filled with the weight of creation itself. They looked upon the world they once ruled, and it remembered them. Zeus stood upon the cliffs of Olympus, lightning coiling around his arms. He felt their power not as threat, but as truth, the echo of what had been buried. Hera stood beside him, silent, her gaze cold and steady. Athena waited with spear in hand, her expression unreadable. "They come," said Hera. Zeus nodded, his voice calm though thunder moved beneath it. "They do not come for vengeance. They come because time does not forget its shape." The heavens flashed. The first Titan's voice rolled across the air, deep, resonant, carrying the tone of eternity itself. "Son of time," Hyperion called. "You have ruled in silence long enough. The river has turned. Will you stand against its course?" Zeus raised his hand and the wind stilled. "I stand not against it. I am its motion. But the world is no longer yours to command." The Titan's eyes burned brighter. "And yet it remembers us. Every heartbeat, every sunrise, every storm speaks our name." Zeus's answer came not in words but in lightning. The sky exploded, splitting the clouds in two. Hyperion raised his arm and light met light. The impact shook the heavens. Mountains bowed. Seas rose to meet the sky. The clash of ages had begun. Poseidon rose from the depths, his trident cutting through walls of water. Oceanus met him in a surge of waves that towered over creation. The sea screamed, roaring in every tongue ever spoken. Hades emerged from the shadow, his hands dragging darkness into form, binding it into chains of memory. But even in shadow, the Titans moved through him like echoes through glass. Demeter called upon the green of the earth, summoning roots older than thought to hold the ground steady. Yet the soil trembled with joy, for it too remembered the Titans. Everywhere the world spoke of return. Every god who struck at the past felt it strike back, not in rage but in recognition. For they were all born from the same current. Zeus's lightning clashed with Hyperion's flame. The air filled with light that had no color. When it faded, both stood unbroken. The Titan smiled, not in victory but in understanding. "You cannot destroy what shaped you," he said. "And you cannot hold what must change," Zeus replied. For a long moment, there was only the sound of wind. The thunder slowed. The light dimmed. Hyperion lowered his hand. "Then let the world decide," he said. And with that, the Titans turned their gaze upon the mortals. They saw cities burning with their old fire, towers rising in imitation of Olympus. They saw humanity carrying both creation and destruction in their hands, a reflection of all divine mistakes. Zeus saw it too. And in that instant he understood the meaning of the Titans' return. They had not come to reclaim the world. They had come to remind him that no one truly rules it. He lowered his hand. The storm faded. The light softened. The Titans did not vanish, but neither did they conquer. They moved through the world as memory, not enemies but balance. The war had lasted only a breath, yet it had changed eternity. From the depths of time, the voice of Cronos whispered once more, "At last you understand. Power is not to be held, it is to be passed on." Zeus looked toward the horizon where the golden light met the sea. "Then the age turns again," he said quietly, "and we must learn to let it." The wind carried his words through heaven and earth alike. Even the Titans bowed their heads, and for the first time since creation began, gods and giants stood in silence together, equals before the river of time. The world was quiet again. The storms had passed, the light had softened, and from the ashes of battle rose a silence deeper than any before. It was not peace. It was understanding. The Titans stood like mountains at the edge of the horizon. Their fury was gone, only memory remained in their eyes. They had come not to reclaim the world but to remind it of its foundation, that everything, even eternity, must move. Zeus stood upon the summit of Olympus, the wind moving through his hair, the scent of rain heavy in the air. Around him gathered the gods, weary, solemn, changed. They had fought not for victory but for meaning, and found that meaning did not belong to any one of them. He raised his hand and lightning curled softly between his fingers. No roar followed, no thunder. Just light. Calm, alive, flowing. This power, he said, is not mine. It never was. It belongs to the current, to time, to the rhythm that shapes us all. Poseidon stepped forward, the sea still glimmering upon his skin. And what will become of us now? Zeus looked down upon the world, upon mortals rebuilding their cities, upon rivers returning to their courses, upon the faint glimmer of stars reborn. We will remain, he said, not as rulers but as echoes, guides, symbols. The world no longer needs to bow to power. It needs to walk beside it. Hera's gaze softened. And when they forget us? Then we will have done our duty, Zeus replied. For what is remembrance if not the shadow of love? The words lingered like the last light of dusk. Far below, mortals looked to the sky and felt the change without knowing its name. They saw constellations shift, new stars burning among the old. The heavens had rewritten themselves. To them it was beauty. To the gods it was transition. In the depths of the world, Cronos watched through the flow of his own eternity. The river of time shimmered around him, each wave carrying the reflection of what had been, the laughter of gods, the cries of mortals, the silence between. He felt no anger now, no need for rule. He was the rhythm itself. His voice was the motion of all things. You have learned, the current whispered, that to control is to end, that only in surrender does time endure. Zeus closed his eyes and felt the voice move through him. It was not command, not prophecy. It was truth. He let the lightning fade from his hand and looked toward the stars. Then let destiny begin its turn, he said. Let what must come, come. And so it did. The river of time, no longer bound by fear or pride, curved gently toward a new horizon. Within its flow, the will of Cronos and the heart of Zeus moved as one, the eternal and the fleeting intertwined. From that union came something neither god nor Titan could have imagined. It was not power. It was pattern. The subtle design that connects all things. The weave of motion, cause and choice. It was destiny. The stars pulsed once, a single breath of light, and then stilled. The world continued, its rhythm unchanged, yet everything within it now carried purpose. Zeus looked down upon creation and saw every life, every act, every breath moving as part of that design. The current no longer obeys, he murmured, but it guides. And somewhere in the deep, Cronos smiled. The storm of ages was over. The river flowed on. And in its quiet turning, the shadow of fate became the promise of future. The stars dimmed as the ages turned. The thrones of Olympus stood untouched, yet empty. The air that once hummed with thunder now lay quiet, filled only with the breath of wind and the murmur of rivers below. The gods had not fallen, they had simply stepped aside. The world no longer needed them. Mortals, born from dust and fire, had become the architects of their own dawn. They built empires that reached toward the sky, cities whose towers caught the light once reserved for heaven. Their hands, though frail, shaped mountains. Their dreams, though fleeting, defied eternity. Zeus watched them from afar, his presence now a whisper in the clouds, a flicker in lightning. He did not envy them. He did not mourn. He only watched, the father of thunder now a guardian of silence. Hera walked among mortals unseen, her pride softened into care. Demeter lingered in the harvest, her laughter in the rustle of wheat. Poseidon rested in the tides, his anger tamed to rhythm. Hestia burned in every hearth, her flame small yet immortal. And Hades, quiet and patient, welcomed the dead with peace instead of fear. The age of gods passed into myth, but their stories did not fade. They became the rhythm that guides all things, the pulse behind every heartbeat, the silence between lightning and thunder. Cronos, the first and last, became not ruler but rhythm, the motion of existence itself. Zeus, the sun who defied time, became its guardian. The Titans, once forgotten, became the foundations of the world. And mortals, fragile and fleeting, became the living proof that eternity learns through impermanence. No age is final. No throne eternal. The current flows, shaping, erasing and renewing. And so, when the stars burn low and the sky grows still, remember this. The gods do not die. They become the story. Once there was only silence. Then came time, and from time the gods. They rose, they ruled, they fell. And in their fall, the world learned to stand. Cronos, father of motion. Zeus, lord of thunder. Titans, creators of stone and sea. Their war shaped the heavens, their peace shaped the earth. And from their echoes we were born. Now the gods sleep and we dream their dreams. Every storm is their whisper, every heartbeat their memory. For time is not a prison, it is a promise. A promise that nothing is ever truly gone. It only changes form. Music swells. Lightning flickers behind clouds. A final flash of gold fills the screen. Thus ends the tale of Cronos, the first father, the last witness, and the eternal river that carries us all.